And Amy, and so Trump on this matter since Friday, the concern is that he directs attention away from Hillary Clinton onto himself by saying something inopportune. So far, he's not really doing that. He's, to the extent that he's addressing the reopening of the criminal investigation into Hillary, he's more or less staying on point as he did in Grand Rapids, Michigan yesterday.
We can be sure that what is in those emails is absolutely devastating. And I think we're going to find out, by the way, for the first time. Thank you, Uma. Thank you, Uma. Good job, Uma.
Good job.
Thank you, Anthony Weiner.
I don't think those thank yous were sincere.
No, I don't either. But Donald Trump also, he talked about Anthony Weiner and how he knew before all of us knew that Weiner was a bad guy.
In New York, we knew Weiner. And I made statements that were rough. Like, how can she be allowed to live with this guy? How can she have access to this important information? And I was badly criticized, right? Now they're saying, Trump has good judgment. Wow.
But the more important than the Weiner Uma stuff is the appeal that he makes and reminding himself by reminding his rally goers that this is about them, not him. And he did that in Grand Rapids.
Hillary is not the victim. The American people are the victims of this corrupt system in every way. And this is your one chance right now, November 8th, to change it.
All right, and to see if
I guess we're 1 week away.
Well, yes, that's right. We'll see if a representative from Trump's campaign can do as well as Trump did in Grand Rapids, Michigan. We're now joined by Steve Cortes, member of Trump's Hispanic Advisory Council. Steve, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Good morning, Dan and Amy. Thanks for having me.
So how are you receiving Trump's approach since Friday's bombshell?
Well, I love it. I think that, number one, we can't look like we're celebrating, and not just because we shouldn't look like it, because we're truly not celebrating. I mean, I think we're Americans before we are partisans, and what we have seen is corruption at the very, very highest levels of our government, a sitting Secretary of State and an ex-president that have run effectively, I believe, a criminal enterprise via the Clinton Foundation. I think, forget about what I think the FBI is shortly going to come to that conclusion, and try to return to our highest office. And so I think that the tactic has been good of let's sort of let them twist in the wind. We don't have to say a whole lot here. The momentum is clearly on our side. The ABC poll that showed us down 12 points 8 days ago now shows us ahead. So I think momentum is on our side. The American people are just not okay with the status quo. They're not okay with it in the economy, and they're not okay with it in terms of national security. And we represent, I think, the kind of transformational movement that can truly change Washington on both of those macro issues, economy and security.
Steve, are you getting directives from the Trump campaign on this matter and how to handle it and, kind of the lines within which to stay?
Sure. I mean, we always get an agenda and we always get talking points. That's almost become a dirty phrase, right? But I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I mean, of course, any organization tries to stay on message.
Sure.
Now, we're not robots. I'm never told you cannot say X, Y, or Z. But, of course, there's suggestions. And, we're treated like big boys and girls, the surrogates and spokesmen when we go out there. But, yeah, of course, we want to try to stay on message. And I think the message right now has been, in a sense, we don't even need to necessarily bash Hillary a whole lot because the facts are doing that for us.
Mm-hmm.
So let them stay on the defensive.
Well, then
let them attack Comey and attack the FBI. We're going to talk about the fact that we are truly the change agents, and this is a change movement. And if you're not okay with status quo, and I think polls show the vast majority of Americans are not, that we represent a stark divergence and a real choice and an optimistic choice. That's the thing. I mean, things are bad, and the good book tells us that we can't just curse the darkness. We have to also light a candle. And that candle, I think, is our policies for economic growth going forward, our policies for national security, both securing our border and being smart about using our power home and abroad. So I think if we do that effectively for this next week, we're going to surprise the world, and we're going to have our own American Brexit, and we're going to win a week from today.
Is that good book? Is that Crippled America or the Bible you're referring to?
That's right. No, that'd be the Bible.
Okay, there you go.
So what about those on the left? Senator Harry Reid and James Carville, they're suggesting that Trump has some connection with the Russians and that James Comey and the FBI they've
Right.
been
Well,
investigating this, and they want him to come forward with that information.
yeah, and Amy, I think that's part of my point. I think if anybody watches that James Carville, I encourage your listeners to go and listen
Oh,
and
yeah.
watch it
We
on
played
YouTube.
it here.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, I mean he's coming unhinged, and I think a lot of the left is. I think they're honestly a bit apoplectic. I think they feel so entitled to power, and they don't want to talk about. By the way, they are all about power rather than policy. So they don't want to talk policy. What they've done is call us names basically for 6 months. Call us racists, call us Nazis, say we're a bunch of racist hillbillies. And when we get down to policy, particularly when we start showing and when it starts getting revealed their own internal corruption, they really almost can't handle it. And so they've been lashing out on this ludicrous notion that somehow we are tied in with Russia. And, nothing could be further from the truth. And by the way, the New York Times, who has been no friend to our campaign, the New York Times today says that the FBI conclusively determined they looked into all of this because there were a lot of allegations about Manafort, who used to be our campaign manager. He does have a lot of business ties to Russia, and nothing wrong with that. He's a private citizen. Whether or not that's on the up and up, I frankly don't know. He's no longer with our campaign, so I don't really care. But regardless, the FBI looked into this thinking, well, is there a campaign? Is there an official connection between Russia and the Trump campaign, as is constantly alleged by the left? And they determined, no, there's just nothing there. There is no secret bat phone to the Kremlin. There is no communication. Now, look, I think Donald Trump has very smartly, in my opinion, said, Russia does not always have to be our adversary, and we're never going to be gullible. We know they are a tough actor, and they're probably most of the time our adversary. But there are times that we have common goals. For instance, destroying ISIS, and we probably can work together. So we don't have to always antagonize Russia. But him saying that doesn't mean that we are somehow in bed with the Kremlin or that Donald Trump. Listen, Donald Trump's not a man who takes a lot of direction from much of anyone, right? Certainly not from foreigners, from the Russians. So,
I don't agree with Trump's posture towards Russia. I think it's been way too conciliatory. However, to your point, the New York Times reporting today, quote from that piece you were referencing, law enforcement officials say that none of the investigations so far have found any conclusive or direct link between Mr. Trump and the Russian government. And even the hacking into Democrat emails, FBI and intelligence officials now believe was aimed at disrupting the presidential election rather than electing Mr. Trump. So that certainly takes one of Hillary's closing memes away from her that she's been, using
right. Well,
liberally through the debates.
The White House yesterday. I mean, if you watch Josh Earnest's press conference yesterday, he was emphatic, by the way, in praising Director Comey. He said he's a man of principle and integrity. So the two big talking points since these revelations on Friday from the Democrats have been, number one, the Russians did it. Number two, Comey's in the tank. Well, the FBI now tells us the Russians have nothing to do with this. And the White House, the Democrat Obama White House, tells us not only is Comey not in the tank, they have full confidence in him and that he's a man of principle and integrity. So I'm not sure where they go next. I don't know what they can do other than sort of just throw up their hands as Carville did and talk like crazy people.
Talking to Steve Cortes, member of Trump's Hispanic Advisory Council, Trump campaign surrogate. And Steve, I noticed you tweeted on topic that localizes this national election, this presidential election. And you connected the campaign to the most violent weekend in Chicago in 2016, which is saying something, 17 dead, 41 wounded. What's the connection you make?
Well, unfortunately for us in Chicago, it's hard to be shocked, isn't it, with violence anymore in our city, and that's a terrible thing. But this was truly shocking, I think, in a couple ways. Number one, 2 17-year-old twin brothers were killed. I mean, what an absolute tragedy that these two that were born on the same day died on the same day via violence. I think the second thing, for those of us who live on the north side, is that this happened in Old Town. So we shouldn't necessarily feel secure that, this is only happening in other parts of the city.
Mm-hmm.
This happened a few blocks away from the Apple Lincoln Park store. So no place is immune, I think, unfortunately, to this kind of violence. But my point was, what is the city council, after this horrific weekend and that awful story of these twin brothers dying in violence, what is the city council doing today? They are voting to take the Trump street sign off of Trump Plaza, the honorary street sign near his magnificent building. And so, talk about majoring in the minors and rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. We have an absolutely catastrophic violence problem in this city right now. We have a failed public education system. And what are the city council members doing? They're engaged in a petty political agenda to take a street sign down of a man who, by the way, invested incredibly in this city and built a magnificent structure and employs hundreds of people, if not thousands indirectly, here in the city of Chicago. A man who we should thank for that investment and for taking that risk rather than worried about taking a sign down. So I think it just shows us how petty the city council is and how feckless our completely one-party Democratic rule is in this city.
Yeah.
Why
They
don't
have misguided priorities.
Why don't they just condemn the building and knock it down?
No, yeah, they
Well,
wanted
right,
to
if
take
they really
down.
mean it.
Yeah.
Well, somebody did, Steve, just so you know, somebody did steal that sign and then they put it back up. Never found out who did it, even though there's surveillance cameras everywhere. Maybe
Amy.
they weren't working at
Oh,
Alderman Riley.
Tiny Dancer's kid.
Yeah.
Steve Cortes, member of Trump campaign, the Trump campaign, his Hispanic Advisory Council. Easy for me to say. And Trump campaign surrogate Steve. Thanks as always for joining us. Appreciate it.
I appreciate it. Have a great day.
Thanks, Steve. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.